Ko rimutaka te pai maunga, ko hiratonga te awa, ko Ngāti Pākehā toko iwi, kei te noho ahu I Aotearoa, ko Ngāti Hikairo te hapu o tēnā rohi. Nā mihi ki te hapu, ko Sandra Dickson ahau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, choice. Okay. Well, kia ora I te whānau. I am Sandra Dickson. I'm also an autistic, bisexual, gender non-conforming bogan woman. Yeah. I'm a survivor of family, partner and sexual violence. And importantly for the kaupapa I'm going to talk about today, I am elder adjacent. So I'm going to talk today about uplifting Takatāpui and Rainbow Elder voices Tukua kia tū takitahi ngā whetū o te rangi, which has been the most extraordinarily beautiful project to have been involved in over the last year. It's been a collaboration funded by the Office for Seniors between us, Hohou Te Rongo Kahukura, and our friends Rainbow Hub Waikato. So our focus as an organisation, for those of you who don't know, is in our name, Hohou Te Rongo, the building of peace, Kahukura inside Takatāpui and Rainbow communities, and in particular we focus on family, partner and sexual violence. So to build peace, to prevent violence, we centre the violence of colonisation, and we've talked about that a lot over the last couple of days, but I just want to be clear about what we mean by that. We believe that colonisation imposed Victorian British values here about what kinds of bodies, what kinds of sex, what kinds of relationships, what kinds of genders, what kinds of families count as normal. And that those values are embedded in our legislation, in our institutions, and our responses to everyone here in Aotearoa, and have a particular form of culturally scaffolding the violence that we experience as Takatāpui and Rainbow folks here. So when we do violence prevention, we are attempting to disrupt those ideas. We train social workers, therapists, police officers, everybody who works in the space of violence prevention to provide safer responses to Takatāpui and Rainbow people after violence. We run healthy relationships programs in the Waikato for adults who are exploring their sexuality or gender, and people come to that in their 20s and in their 70s and everything in between. And we provide and create resources for the safe parenting, to support safe parenting, of Takatāpui and Rainbow children and young people, including Kōrero Mai, which is our brand new resource that will be coming out very soon to prevent child sexual abuse. And we do a bunch of other stuff too, but like every other community group here, we could only do that work because of the volunteers that support us, yeah? Like every other community group here, the work I'm talking about is partially funded at best. So these are some of the beautiful advisory rōpū that work with us on our mahi. We're very ably led by the two wonderful people in the middle there, Kathleen Miller and Tim Bennett. So folks, last month, International Day of Older Persons, the United Nations issued a statement highlighting the human rights challenges faced by older Rainbow people. They called on countries to design and implement measures to address violence and discrimination, and they said, and excuse this clunky language, when persons find themselves at the intersection of older age and being LGBT, they face a compounded situation that leads to an increased risk of heightened discrimination, social exclusion and violence. Now that UN statement and the 9 recommendations accompanying it came out just 3 days after we launched this research. Now, obviously, I would like to say that we planned that, that there was a strategic approach. That would be completely untrue. But it does tell us, I think, that we are starting to look into the space a little bit more internationally, which is a good thing. Stepping back from that kind of international context, though, I want to acknowledge the beautiful and profound mahi of the research team village around this project. We had support from many elder advisors around the country who told us what to look for and what to look at. You can see Dr. Huhana there doing her fair stuff at one of those events. And we also benefited from community members being involved as interviewers, as focus group facilitators, providing social work support and offering community advice to us. I'm not going to talk much about the how though. I want to talk about who we heard from and what we heard a little bit in the time we have. So we gathered information in 3 different ways. Via a confidential online survey, we heard from 424 older Takatāpui and Rainbow people, all over the age of 55, living all over the country in both rural and urban settings. We heard from more Pākehā, but 7% of our participants were Māori and 7 were Pacifica, Asian or another ethnicity. People were mostly lesbian and gay, but about 1 in 5 identified as bisexual or Takatāpui. Just over 1 in 10 were trans and non-binary, and just under half said they had some form of disability. In the second form of information gathering we used through our focus groups, we made a deliberate attempt to reduce the risk of whitening this research. We knew that we were going to hear more from older Pākehā people because our older populations are significantly less ethnically diverse in Aotearoa as a whole. So we held focus groups with Takatāpui and Rainbow, Pacifica and ethnic people younger than elders, and social services practitioners from those communities who serve those communities. And across 6 focus groups, we heard from 17 people about how they saw the needs of Takatāpui and Rainbow elders in their specific cultural contexts. And then last but not least, we also interviewed 11 people in person. And that was partly because our elder advisors around the country said we want to hear people's voices. We don't just want something to read at the end of this. We actually want to be able to listen to how people are living their lives. So 5 of the folks we interviewed were Māori, 1 was Pacifica, 4 were trans and non-binary, including both trans-feminine and trans-masculine people. We interviewed people with different ages, sexualities, living situations and disabilities. Every interview was recorded with consent, and our interviewers worked together and separately to identify the themes that came through. We've turned those themes into mini podcasts that are now available to listen to from our website. And I'm going to play a couple of clips from them later. Okay, so those podcasts and the full community report both focus on what our elders in Aotearoa said about social connection, discrimination, community groups and services for older people, families and whānau, safety and relationships, and hopes, plans and fears about ageing. Now, our elders have lived through shared generational contexts, right? We understand that. We understand our legal rights have changed. We understand that we've lived through the HIV and AIDS crisis. We understand that actually the world looks very different now than it did when many of the people who took part in this research were coming of age. But the whakatauki that Dr. Huhana selected for this project, Tukua kia tū takitahi na whetū o te rangi, let each star shine out clearly and be seen, is also about us needing to acknowledge that that shared generational context has been experienced in really specific and unique ways by our elders. So, for example, our focus groups, it is going to surprise nobody in this room, colonisation and racism were a really key topic of conversation. So from our Takatāpui focus group, whānau needs safe spaces to learn about Takatāpuitanga so that they can apply it to their own home and uphold tikanga and kawa. Wananga about the whakapapa of Takatāpuitanga, the whakapapa of Kahukura, will make these words and concepts more accessible to whānau. Younger Takatāpui and Rainbow Pacific and ethnic people also talked about how vital the connections were between older and younger community members were for them. In fact, they were super clear that ageism, the denigration, treating older people as expendable, including inside our rainbow communities, is rooted in Western values. So from our Pacifica Rainbow group, there are no services for Pacifica Rainbow Plus elders, but there is wonderful work going on in Pacifica Rainbow Plus groups, offering intergenerational bridges between young and older community members. So as well as that ageism, as well as that whitening of rainbow community spaces, there's also some isolation for ethnic rainbow elders around a failure to attend to key differences. What they told us was that ethnic rainbow elders are largely invisible within the queer community and society in Aotearoa New Zealand. Many ethnic rainbow elders were queer at a time when it was criminalised in many countries and even punishable by death, and may still be. And I think the Nord talked about that really beautifully this morning. Okay, so what this project has tried to do is really deeply explore that intersection of ageing and being Takatāpui or rainbow that the UN pointed to. And one of the examples that has come through this project is that disconnection from families and whānau is the reality for many, if not most, of our elders. And that's both from families of origin, but also for those of us who come out later in life from children and grandchildren too. And that makes our elders more isolated, less resourced and more vulnerable to potential elder abuse, both inside families, but also because that means that their safety systems outside families are support services. They don't always know how to work with us, right? I'm going to play you one quote from one of our interviewees on this.
And my whole thing, and this is probably the lessons from me growing up, I come from a very small, dysfunctional community. And when I was young, we had extremely high rates of family, or still do, family violence, homicide, stuff like that. So like many of the gay men my age that I know, life was about getting the fuck out.
Sorry, I should have been giving a trigger warning for the language that our elders use. That will continue to be an issue. So we found very high rates of mistreatment reported by elders. And I want to talk about this now specifically in the context of gender-affirming healthcare. Here we have a trans elder talking about her experiences of the intersection between ageing and seeking gender-affirming healthcare.
Second time I went to the sexual health service, I was in some distress. And I was welcomed nicely, and the person who interviewed me assiduously wrote down all sorts of notes, said you can do something about that, you can do something about that. So I was starting to feel some relief. Until I mentioned that I have a chronic complaint that would cause, that is liable to cause blood clots, and it will cause blood clots if I have HRT. The interest level just disappeared. And I had a second appointment to see the same person who was still going to present me with all the things that they sorted out when I went back, they'd done nothing at all. What I was wanting really was some help with mental health, and that door was firmly closed.
So that's just one example, but we found actually that trans and non-binary elders were reporting the highest rates of mistreatment in most of the social contexts that we were asking about. Just one example, half said that they'd been verbally or physically abused on the street or in a public place in the last 2 years. So when we think about discrimination for our elders, we're not only talking about in the past, we're also talking about the ways that the anti-queer, anti-trans rhetoric is impacting on their lives right now. And I wonder how visible that is to most of us. I don't feel like that's the stuff we usually talk about. The impact of that mistreatment and fear of mistreatment is pretty simple. People stop doing stuff and become more socially excluded. So 1 in 5 of the elders who answered our survey said that they just don't go to support groups for older people because they don't know what they're going to be like. They don't know how safe they're going to be. Okay, we also found our elders were talking about how safe it was for them to share who they were. I'm going to again share a wee clip from an interviewee, and this one's a bit quiet, so.
You couldn't do anything in town. Because family of people you knew worked in the bank, the lawyers, everywhere.
Yeah.
School teachers, everywhere.
Yeah.
So you did things that people knew who you were, who your cousins were, who your aunts were, who your parents were, what your father did, all that sort of stuff. So it was very sort of suffocating.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine.
And the consequences of getting caught. When you went to jail, you know?
Yeah.
Shit.
So most of the elders that we engaged with for this project said that they don't share their identity in some parts of their lives. But more than 1 in 10 said they don't share their identity with anyone. So I just want us to take a moment to think about how brave it is to answer a survey when you don't talk about who you are anywhere in your life. And this is higher for some groups in our communities too, for Māori, Pacifica and ethnic elders and for bisexual elders in particular. Okay, I want to give a trigger warning for the next slide. I am going to talk very briefly for just one slide about what our elders said about sexual harm. Okay, so just take a moment to centre yourself around that. So through interviews and our survey, many elders shared experiences with sexual harm. Sometimes that was from partners or in hookup contexts. But we also heard quite a lot about institutional contexts where sexual harm had taken place. So that included being targeted for child sexual abuse in families, being sexually harmed in school environments as part of bullying about gender or sexuality, being sexually harmed inside healthcare contexts by New Zealand police, and being targeted for sexual harm in public contexts to correct or punish their identity. And what folks said about that, what folks of all genders said about that, was that most of the time when these experiences happened, they believed that they were being targeted or punished for being different. Okay, no more sexual harm. So based on the voices of our elders, we have come up with some recommendations, as you do, for government, for funders, for services for older people, and for us, for Takatāpui and Rainbow community groups, because we are often the people that need to name the human rights that need to be defended in our community, right? And the reality is right now, our elders don't feature in national strategies for older people, don't feature in services planning, including in aged care, and they're not really featuring right now inside our Takatāpui and particularly our Rainbow community spaces either, or at least definitely not as much as they want to be. So I guess my invitation to you from this very horribly squished in talk, for me trying to fit in as much as I can, is please enjoy the wisdom that our elders have shared with us via this project, via the podcast and the hundreds of quotes that are in the report. There's some reports over there. Please pick it up and take it and do good work with it. In terms of responding to the call for action from the UN, they have offered us a roadmap to follow if we are listening. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Ko te aroha anō he wai, e pupu ake ana, e awa he mapuna mai ana, I roto I te whatu manawa. Ko te ramahana he honu, aina ia karere anō. He tai timu, he tai pari, he tai ope, he tai roa, he tai nui. E tai nui.